Welcome to the Personalities in the Workplace podcast. We're introducing you to an easy-to-understand conversation about personalities. Navigating the different personalities in your business can be tedious. We believe that once you understand what drives and stresses those you work with, you can better interact and steer others towards productivity and success. Today, we're focusing on the differences between judgers and perceivers, and we'll get to that in just a moment. This episode is made available because of the generous sponsorship of Blackburn Consulting. Learn more about Blackburn Consulting at blackburnconsultingnc.com.
Greetings. This is Timogi, the Empowerment Specialist. Welcome to Personalities in the Workplace. And our very special guest is the one, the only Chuck Taylor.
The one and the only, the all-star.
Yes.
Humble
Chuck
debut.
Taylor, from Sage Garden Care Center. So thank you for joining us again as we discuss Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
We have discussed, Chuck, the difference between being an introvert and an extrovert, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and now we're into this final pair of judgment and perception. So for me, when I hear judgment, the first thing I hear is judgmental.
Right.
So can you go ahead and get that out the way
That's
right
it.
now?
If you're judging, you are a very judgmental person. That's the takeaway from this that you need to walk away with. I'm kidding. I jest. That's not true. That's not true. So when we think of these two, what we're really talking about is how you interact or approach the outside world, outside of yourself, how other people see you interacting. So one of the ways I like to describe it is if you're judging, you often will make judgments about the way things ought to be. Whereas if you're perceiving, you're more likely to perceive situations by taking in more information, asking questions to try to better understand your circumstances. Okay?
I do, but I've heard the phrase before, perception matters.
Sure. Why doesn't it?
And so, does what you perceive, outweigh? So I'm a thinker, so I want to put this on a scale, Chuck. I want to put all of these personality types on a scale, and I want to weigh them,
right?
And I want to find out which one is right and wrong, even though that's not the purpose, right?
That is not the purpose, and we are not going to do that. Right, and as a perceiver, I understand that each one has value. You just have to walk around each one, and you have to say, okay, what kind of value does this one have? Why does it have value? So let's park this at what it really is. So this is how we interact with the outside world.
Okay.
So if you're a judger, what we're talking about is you're organizing your world in a structured and cohesive way. You like your lists. You enjoy having tasks to do. You like having a schedule. You know what's going to be planned for you throughout the day. You like having short-term plans, long-term plans, and you like to have things decided and done. Judgers, they're the ones who are quick to act, jump right into it, ready to go, let's go. Perceivers, on the other hand, they don't like their lists. They like their options, right? So I will plan something until something else better comes along. Which can be quite frustrating to our judging friends.
Yeah.
Okay, right? And so perceivers also like to be very spontaneous. They like adventure. They love flexibility. This is huge in the workplace, right? Because sometimes we go to people and we say, I want to give you more pay because you're doing a good job. If you've got someone who's got a perceiving type of their personality, what they may want is flexibility to be able to do their job, but come in a little later in the morning or leave a little earlier in the afternoon. That may mean way more to them than pay.
You read the memo I sent you this morning, Chuck?
That's that the one? Yep.
I want to come in a little later, Chuck.
You can come in later.
Oh, wow. And so, again, this is not about being judgmental.
That's correct. Absolutely not.
This is not about looking at a thing and stating what it is and isn't based on what I judge it to be.
Well, now that's not entirely true. Sometimes that's exactly what it is.
So then help me.
So if we've got people who are judgers, oftentimes they're making judgments that they perceive to be true about a situation. So out of the 16 personality types, we have 8 that are on that judgmental side. Not judgmental, they're judging side. And so what they're going to do is they're going to say things ought to work this way. Things should be done this way, right? They're making a judgment about how things should be done. Now, they're doing it from their perspective. They're not inherently wrong. They're using social values and circumstances to be able to define that. But the reality is the other 8 personality types don't perceive it to be that way. Right? They perceive that the world is much more fluid. There's a lot more flexibility in how things ought to be done. You tell me that in order for a person to be dressed properly for work, well, they need to look X, Y, and Z way. Well, a perceiver might say, but do they always have to look that way? Does it really have to be that way? The only reason it has to be that way is because people say it's that way. The reality is if we change our perception a little bit, we can adjust. Maybe people work a lot better. You get a lot more work out of people if you.
I had a woman tell me that's the reason she doesn't wear deodorant and doesn't do some other stuff because the world. She told me even about Spanx because I love Spanx, right?
Okay.
She said she said why? I said because they make my clothes fit better.
Oh.
She says you think they make your clothes fit better because the world has taught you to believe that the Spanx make your clothes fit better. And so I'm thinking, no, they fit better. Trust me, they fit better.
Not because of the world, because of my mirror.
Right. The world is not in my house in the morning getting dressed. And so for me, that area of that's an area where when you're looking at, she's saying she's looking at me, telling me, no, that's what you think. That's what you've based on my perception of. Mm-hmm. So is this whole perception judgment thing about your perception of yourself or your perception of others? Talk to
Both.
me.
Right?
It's both.
Right. So it's about perception. So how do you perceive things to be? So it depends on what you're looking at. Remember, this is the last quadrant of our personality types. So we've already infused in extroversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking versus feeling. So by the time we get here, what's happening is other components are really measuring what we're looking at. So if I am a perceiving type person, if I am an introverted, sensing, feeling type person, as a perceiver, I'm going to be focused on me and what I'm thinking of because I'm an introvert, right?
Okay.
That doesn't mean I'm selfish, just means that's where I spend my time. I'm sensing, so I like to know what's going on in front of me, what's practically applied, what I can put my hands on, what I can touch, what I can understand, what's traditional.
Okay.
I'm feeling, which means I care about other people. I care about the impact of what is going on. But as a perceiver, I'm flexible to the idea of how things ought to be done. It doesn't have to be done this way. Now, what's interesting is by the time we get here, we see some pretty dramatic shifts between their counterparts. So if I'm an ISFP, what I just described,
Okay.
compare that with an ISFJ. Both are very caring, both are very thoughtful, both are very concerned with making sure that they do things well and doing things in the right way. However, a judger might say it needs to be done this way in order to help other people out. And a perceiver might say, well, it doesn't have to be done that way. Maybe we could do it a different way. Let's try something else. Let's go over here. I don't know. Let's just explore what this could be. And they ask a lot of questions. So here's one of the things that you'll see really clearly when we talk about judging versus perceiving.
Okay.
Judgers act quickly. Perceivers are hesitant to act because they're still taking in information and asking questions.
Well, I was at a staff meeting a couple weeks ago, and I looked at one of my coworkers, and I wanted to put Spanx on my coworker. So my question is, was I judging or was I perceiving that some Spanx would have helped her clothes fit a little better, Chuck?
So you might have been judging if you said the only way that she can look good is if she were to put some Spanx on.
Okay.
But you might have just perceived that she would look better if she had some Spanx on, right? So the difference really comes down to these words. I love these words, should and ought. If you're using should and ought in your sentences and your language, you probably tend to lean more towards that judging side.
She should and ought to put some Spanx on with that outfit.
So sometimes perceivers will spend time kind of measuring out the consequences. So they'll say, you could do it this way. Now, if you did, here's what the outcome might be. If you do it this way, here's what the outcome might be. And so to our judging counterparts, perceivers are very non-committal. They're very flexible. They're very open-ended. They don't dedicate themselves to any one particular cause or function because they're always trying to understand what else could be going on other than the obvious. And that can be confusing.
I'm confused. I'm sitting over here and I'm confused right now because sometimes so I tell on myself every time we do one of these podcasts, Chuck, as to which one of these I am. And I'm and I think I'm like high in all of these areas. Like I'm like the extreme end of these places. So when you're looking at judgment versus perception and you're looking at someone who wants to maybe go with the flow a little bit versus somebody who's a little bit more rigid, talk to me.
Yeah, so I think you've identified that well. A person who's more go with the flow, meaning that they're easy, they don't have to do it one way, they're open, they're adaptable to change and circumstances. That's probably someone who's leaning on that perceiving side, right? That's their preference is for perceiving. On the other hand, the person who has structure, who is more rigid in the way that they want to do things, they're action-oriented, they want to get it done, they probably have a stronger preference for their judging side. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we allow people to work within the area that they do best. So here's an analogy that we find with folks.
Okay.
Let's say as a supervisor, I go to a group of individuals in my workplace and I say, all right, there's 3 of you here. We've got a project that needs to be done. Okay. 2 of them are judgers and the third one is a perceiver. Okay. Now, each of the people kind of go back into their different areas and they start doing the work. Well, judgers, guess when they're going to start on the project?
Immediately?
Right away. They're on it, right? Because they know we got plenty of work we need to do. We need to act on it. We need to get it done. Now, the difficulty is a perceiver is going to be seen as not working on the project. As a matter of fact, most perceivers are thought to be procrastinators. And that's not really what they're doing because what the perceiver's doing is thinking about the information and typically is mulling it over in their head. If they're extroverts, they may go talk it out with other people, have discussions, ask a whole bunch of questions, gather information, and they may not be putting pencil to paper, but they're doing work about it. And then all of a sudden, 2 days, 3 days before the project's due, then they sit down and they hammer it out quite quickly. The frustrating thing for the judging counterparts is in 2 days' time, they were able to accomplish what judges took 2 weeks to do. All right, we're going to take a brief pause here to say thank you to our sponsor for today's show, Audrey Blackburn of Blackburn Consulting. And here's what I want you to know today. I know many business leaders that are great at the work that they do. They know how to go out there and do their job well. When it comes to planning out their business, however, sometimes that plan that gets them from where they are today to that place where they want to be, well, it's just not as smooth and as seamless as they'd like it to be. This is where Audrey steps in. A strategic planner, she looks at a profit-first model and she says, look, if you want your business to grow, here are the structures and the tools and the implements that we want to put in place to help you achieve those goals. And then you do that thing that you do best, which is you go to work. You get out there and you meet your customers and you provide the services or the products that's going to help your business grow. So I challenge you to be forward-thinking in the future of your business and reach out to Audrey today. You can find her at blackburnconsultingnc.com. All right, let's get back to our show. And it's just 2 different ways of coming to the same results.
Which is fine if I don't have to pass on one part of this project to the next team or the next division or the next group.
Yes.
So if I'm working in this small little silo where I don't have to just do my piece of it and give other people time to plan and do what they need to do.
Yeah. So where our perceiving counterparts get in trouble in the workplace, because we do, and I'm a perceiver type person. I'm an extroverted perceiver. And so where I've gotten in trouble a lot is I sit down with people in the workplace and they say, all right, here's our new project and here's what we're going to do. And the first thing I start doing is poking holes in it. And I start going, should we do it that way? I don't know. Let's think about this for a moment. Is this really the best course of action? What happens if we do it this? And people get very frustrated with me because they go, Chuck, would you stop asking questions and just do your job, right? Act on it. Let's get going. On the other hand, you've got that introverted perceiver who's going to be doing the same thing, but they're going to be doing it inside their head. And so they're going to be perceived as just not working on a project. What are you doing? Why are you not doing anything with this? Oh, I'm working on it. How? I don't see you doing any work at all. And the damage control is exactly what you're talking about, is they're supposed to be handing off part of a project to somebody else, and either they're waiting to the last minute when that part is due, or they're not doing it in a timely fashion, and so it holds other people up. It can be quite frustrating. If you're a perceiver type, you have to remember you work with other people, and you need to share that responsibility, or you can let people down.
Yeah, for sure. I remember once going to a job interview, and it was for a supervisor's position within a company and for a specific division. And, what is the first thing you're going to do? What is the first thing you're going to do as if you're selected to be the supervisor in this role? And my answer, which, by the way, let me go ahead and let you know I didn't get the job, was the first thing I'm going to do is assess this program and see if you're actually doing what you said you were doing.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Which I'm sure went over like
real well.
Balloons.
Yeah,
yes.
They were like, yes, she's the one.
They already knew they were doing the job well. They just need someone to get in the zone and do it.
That's right. That's right. And so when you think about judging versus perception, I wanted to see the hardcore facts. I wanted to see, I know what you say you do.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about it.
Right.
So I have to assess it to see if you're doing what you said you would do.
Absolutely.
But they didn't feel that way. They did not perceive that from me. So no, I did not get a call back to a second interview.
So interesting with this, when I'm working with judgers, I tell them you've got to slow down oftentimes because you're making decisions very quickly, and you might be making the decision right. But you may be moving so fast that you're not taking into account other information that perceivers can bring to the table. In their minds, there's no reason to do a bad job, so the job that I'm doing is a good job inherently because I'm doing it, right? And I'm not thinking about other ways it could be done because it could be done that way. I do it. Right? I'm doing it this way. This is the way to do it. And until they're shown a reason why they should change that, oftentimes they get stuck in their path.
Right. So, when you look at all of these, I guess, I don't want to call them opposites. They're not necessarily opposites. Right. They're just different operating styles. Yep. Where there's no right and wrong. So we do want to reiterate that, right?
Absolutely.
There is no right or wrong here. What it is just about finding the operating style of your employees and using that knowledge and that information to be able to better guide them, whether they're working individually, whether they're working on projects. And so what about when it comes to disciplinary actions? I just wonder.
Disciplinary actions are fun. Well, so if you got a disciplined employee, one of the things that you really want to spend some time doing is understanding why they did the thing that you believe they know they shouldn't be doing, right? Because we don't discipline when someone legitimately doesn't know. We discipline because someone did something that they're not supposed to be doing. But one of the things I ask all the time, whenever there's some behavior that frustrates somebody else, is what is the benefit to that person to have that behavior? Why is it they decided to do what it is that they're doing? As I come to understand that, then that helps me understand what kind of discipline is best and what's ultimately going to be good for the company. Right, so we bring the fairness conversation in. We talked about with feelers versus thinkers, and thinkers want fairness applied universally, and feelers want fairness applied by circumstance. Judgers and perceivers, on the other hand, I got judgers who come in and they'll say, well, this was the right way to do it, just their this way is different than my this way, and so now I feel like I have to discipline because I think they did it the wrong way. Or a perceiver may come in and they didn't act quick enough because they spent too much time thinking about what needed to be done or why it needed to be done, etc. I think critically important to anything when you're dealing with personalities is communicate with individuals to learn the circumstance and situation before you act. But I'm also a perceiver, and that's the way I like to act.
Versus the judgment, right?
Yes,
who's going to just say, I wanted A, you gave me B.
And we're not doing that.
And it's done.
Yep.
Right? And so Chuck, again, trying to balance out these personality traits and figuring out who these people are, how they function. It appears to me that I see the foundation. You've done an excellent job for us in laying the foundation.
Good, thank you.
And creating, I guess, just an atmosphere for us to kind of see just a little bit of who these people are. On our next podcast, we're actually going to dive in a little bit to all of this. I is TJIN. ENFPTPRARESPCT, right? We're going to jump in to these 4-letter of these 16 personality traits that come.
Yes. So we're gonna dive deep into each one of the individual personality types.
Wow.
So we're gonna have 16 different ones. And I encourage you, you know, here's the temptation. The temptation is that you as a leader or somebody else, you're gonna go to the podcast that fits your personality type. That's fine. Start there. That's okay. But I really encourage you, get to know each one of the 16 personality types, because you're going to interact with them at some point in time. And if you understand them, you're better able to motivate them, leverage them, and use them for good.
Right. And if you are an INFP, do not let me prevent you from listening to the rest of this podcast series.
Nice.
Because I'm just wired a little differently.
Yep.
But even being wired differently, I'm able to see the value that each personality type brings to the table.
Absolutely.
So rather than look at how we're different and why we're different, I prefer to focus on the value.
That's exactly right. And that's what we're going to do, is everybody brings something of value. Let's leverage that for good.
Absolutely. So we'll see you on the very next podcast of Personalities in the Workplace with Chuck Taylor.
See you soon.
All right.
Thank you for listening to episode 5 of the Personalities in the Workplace podcast, sponsored by Blackburn Consulting. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to Blackburn Consulting, links to the Personality in the Workplace personality cards that we mentioned, more information on Timogi Jackson and me, Chuck Taylor of Sage Garden Care Center, a link to take your own personality assessment online, and much more. Each episode, we're bringing you practical, tangible, and engaging conversations that will help you gain perspective on the people you work with. Join us for the next episode, where we will discuss our first personality type, the ENFJ. Is there something more you would like to learn about regarding personalities? Send us an email at chuck@personalitiesintheworkplace.com. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next podcast.